The heavy humidity of Florida clung to my skin that evening. I was rocking in my porch chair. Just then, my phone rang. My granddaughter Emily's name appeared on the screen. Emily didn't call often. So, I answered with surprise. "Grandma, can you come over this weekend?" she said. There was a cheer in her voice, but that cheer felt artificial, a bit tense to me. With the intuition of years, I sensed it. My granddaughter was hiding something from me. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, smiling, but a subtle unease stirred within me. Seconds later, my son Michael's voice came through. "Mom, just a short visit to watch the kids is enough," he said, as if trying to limit the conversation. "Nothing else is needed." At that moment, I felt a tightness in my heart. Why just watch the kids? Why nothing else? Then I heard a whisper on the other end, Michael's wife, Laura. "Don't tell her, not yet," she said. What weren't they telling me? In that moment, a doubt settled in me like a stone. But I didn't speak. I chose silence. Hadn't I always done that? I had worked silently, sacrificed silently, waited silently to be loved. Raising Michael hadn't been easy. When James died, Michael was only 17. The day we buried my husband, I held my son's hand tightly and buried my own grief deep in my heart. Because I knew, if I didn't stand strong, Michael would crumble. I worked nights at the diner, mornings at other jobs. I sacrificed my health, my dreams, to cover his college expenses. I gave everything for his future. But after he married Laura, the balance shifted. Laura's presence entered the house like a silent but heavy shadow. She changed my curtains, threw out the tablecloths I'd embroidered by hand, calling them old-fashioned. She set aside the family photos hanging on the walls. That house was my house. James and I bought it in 1979. Its walls faded by the sun, its porch weathered by salty air. It was still our sanctuary. Michael grew up in that house. He built sandcastles on the beach, polished his first surfboard on the porch. That house was filled with memories. But for Laura, it was just a space to impose her own order. I began to live like a stranger in my own home. I never raised my voice. Because that's what I was taught: endure for family, stay silent for family. But my inner silence was slowly turning into a scream. And that evening, I found the answer. Emily's invitation, Michael's cautious words, Laura's whisper, it all came together, and I learned the truth: Emily's wedding was being planned. And I, her grandmother, was not invited. Sitting on the porch, staring at the sky, the pain in me outweighed even Florida's humid air. From the outside, I looked like a quiet, calm woman. But inside, the resentment that had built up over years was now simmering like a volcano. The son I raised with sacrifice, the son whose life I carried on my back, had excluded his mother from his daughter's happiest day. In that moment, I realized my silence hadn't protected me, it had made me invisible. And that realization was a turning point. Saturday morning, I set out from Michael and Laura's house with a weight in my heart. Florida's humid sun filtered through the palm leaves, and as I drove along the wide boulevard on the city's edge, the sky turned almost blindingly white. At the wheel, my thoughts were a tangled mess. I kept replaying Emily's artificial cheer, Laura's whisper in the background, Michael's distant tone. A mother, a grandmother, always knows the sound of her heart. Something was being kept from me, and I could feel the shadow of the truth. When I reached the door, it swung open before I could even touch the bell. My grandchildren were waiting for me. Emily, no longer a child but a young woman, was 22, her eyes still sparkling with the curiosity she had as a little girl, but there was a hidden unease in her. Beside her stood her younger brother, Noah, who at 10 years old leapt into my arms with innocent joy. "Grandma, I'm so happy to see you," Emily said, but I sensed tension in her voice. Her smile wasn't genuine, there was a forced twitch at the corners of her lips. Stepping inside, the house felt foreign to me. The living room was decorated to Laura's taste, neutral-toned walls, an expensive floral arrangement in the corner, neatly stacked magazines on the table. Nothing recalled Michael's childhood. This house wasn't a family home to me, it was like a cold showcase under Laura's control. Laura's voice came from the kitchen. She was holding a tablet, her finger swiping quickly across the screen. Without looking up, she spoke. "Margaret, I ordered pizza for the kids. You'll pick them up at 8, okay?" "Sure," I said softly. I was no longer surprised that she saw me only as a babysitter. But then my eyes caught a golden envelope on the table. It had a name written in large, elegant letters, Emily Rose Thompson. My hand reached for it, almost without my control. The thick paper's texture alone hinted at a special invitation. I stayed silent, but my eyes turned to Laura. "What's this?" I said, my voice carrying neither anger nor hurt, just calm, piercing curiosity. Laura's fingers froze on the tablet screen. A moment of silence followed. Her face tensed, her gaze darted away. "It's just a friend's wedding," she said hesitantly. But I saw the lie in her eyes. A woman knows the truth in another woman's faltering voice, in her averted glance. My heart tightened. Just then, Michael walked in. I recognized the look on his face, guilt mixed with anger. In a few steps, he was beside us, snatching the invitation from my hand as if it burned him. "Mom, this doesn't concern you," he said. His words hit me like a slap. My own son, the son I gave my youth, my sleepless nights, my sweat to keep alive, was now telling me his daughter's wedding doesn't concern me. In that moment, I wasn't struck by my heart but by the truth. It was Emily's wedding. And I, her grandmother, was not invited. That evening, back at my house, I sat on my porch and watched the dark sea. Tampa's waters shimmered under the moonlight, a light breeze carrying the scent of salt to my face. The image of the envelope was seared into my mind. I remembered Emily as a child, saying, "Grandma, never leave me, okay?" I recalled the shifts I worked 3 nights in a row to pay for her ballet lessons, the nights I stayed up until dawn sewing her graduation dress, the mornings she fell asleep listening to my stories. And now, on her biggest day, I was a stranger. But that night, something else happened. Silence filled my heart. Not just hurt, but the silence of a decision. Because I had always stayed silent, always chosen to hold my tongue. But this time, my silence wouldn't be surrender. It would be the start of a plan. In my bedroom, I opened an old drawer. From it, I pulled out a box I'd kept for years. Inside was the deed to our house. The document of everything James and I had owned. But there was something even more important, a paper about one of Tampa's finest beach villas, owned by James's old friend Robert. Robert had once said he owed us a favor. And I always felt that favor would come in handy one day. That day had come. I might have been excluded from Emily's wedding, but in the shadow of that wedding, would have a silent but powerful presence. And this time, no one could ignore me. The next morning, sipping coffee on my porch, I scrolled through my phone and dialed an old number. The ringing stirred memories from years ago. Then a familiar voice answered. "Margaret." Robert said, warm and enthusiastic. "It's been years. What a great surprise." I closed my eyes, his voice's confidence reminding me of old days. Days when James and I sat on that beach villa's porch, laughing over fishing stories. Robert was James's closest friend and our family's silent supporter. "Robert," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "there's something I need to talk about." His voice turned serious. "Of course, I'm listening." I mentioned Emily's wedding but didn't say I wasn't invited. I hid that wound. I didn't want to seem pitiful or excluded in Robert's eyes. I only asked about the wedding venue, as if I were a curious neighbor. "That villa," he said. "Yes, they booked it for Emily's wedding. But," he lowered his voice, "the payment hasn't been finalized yet." I set my coffee down, a faint smile forming on my lips. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. "Robert," I said, slow and resolute, "you once said you owed me a favor. Do you remember?" "Of course I remember," he said without hesitation. I haven't forgotten those days. I owe you and James a lot. What do you want me to do? My heart beats silently. Put the reservation on hold. And don't tell anyone. There was a brief silence on the other end. In that silence, I could feel Robert weighing whether to trust me. Finally, he let out a deep breath. Okay, Margaret, he said. This is your right. If that's what you want, I'll do it. When I hung up, a strange peace settled in my heart. This wasn't the peace of anger but of control. My silence was no longer helplessness, it was my strength. That afternoon, I went into the living room. I opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope I'd kept for years. A letter James wrote shortly before he died. My hands trembled as I opened it. Margaret, it read in his shaky handwriting, don't trust your family too much. You are the heart of this house. But hearts sometimes break. And when you break, there'll be no one to hold them together. My eyes welled up as I read the lines. Those words, which I couldn't make sense of back then, now cut like a knife. Michael and Laura hadn't just made a mistake by excluding me, they'd proven James's warning true. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. I silently vowed, would make them face their mistakes with their own silence. I wouldn't shout, wouldn't fight. You could take revenge without screaming. The next day, I went to town. I bought some seeds from the florist, fresh vegetables from the market, and in the afternoon, I worked the soil on my porch. To an outsider, I looked like an old woman tending her garden. But inside, something else was growing, a patient, silent plan. As I planted in the soil, I could almost hear James's voice. Margaret, you always chose patience. But remember, patience is sometimes the sharpest weapon. Just as roots spread silently in the soil, my plan would spread too. When the wedding day came, everyone would wear their masks, but I would see them in their rawest form. And this time, my silence would speak. A week later, I was brewing fresh coffee in the morning when my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I felt that the time for my silent reckoning had come. The moment I answered, I heard the panic in my son's voice. Mom. What did you do? He said, almost shouting. The wedding venue reservation was cancelled. Emily's devastated, she's crying. It was as if their world had collapsed. But my world had already been shattered, broken piece by their selfishness over the years. I listened silently. His panic clashed with my calm. Mom, talk to me. This was so important to us. Michael continued. From the background, Laura's sharp voice cut through, just like the condescending look she'd given me for years. How could you do this, Margaret? This is outright selfishness. That word, selfish, pierced my soul like a dagger. Selfish, when I had lived for their happiness, sacrificed my own desires, worked day and night. Who was truly selfish? Who's selfish, Michael? I said, my voice steady but my words sharp as a blade. Me, or you who excluded me from my granddaughter's wedding? A heavy silence fell on the other end. Silence, the clearest sign of guilt. Laura mumbled something, perhaps trying to make excuses, but Michael didn't respond. I could only hear his breathing quicken. Finally, he spoke, his voice broken. Mom, please, we made a mistake. We're sorry. But now, for Emily, can you get the venue back? I closed my eyes, searching for sincerity in their words. There was none. This apology wasn't for me, it was regret for the grand wedding they'd lost. It was a mere patch over years of disregard and exclusion. No, I said firmly. Not this time. Your apology is for the spectacle you lost, not for me. You'll face my absence. Their breaths grew heavier on the other end. Michael tried to speak again, but I had already made my decision. I quietly hung up, then stared at the cold screen for a long moment. Seconds later, I blocked his number. I stepped onto the porch. The sea churned at the horizon, gulls cried overhead. In that moment, I realized I had spent years waiting for their approval, their love. But now I was breaking free. Like the sea, with my own waves, my own storm. That afternoon, I called Robert again. As if he'd been waiting for this moment, he answered immediately. "Margaret," he said. "Robert," I said clearly, "cancel the reservation completely. Rent the venue to someone else. I don't want it going back to them." A brief silence followed, then Robert's voice came through. "Are you sure? This will be a big blow to their wedding." "Maybe." I cut him off gently but firmly. "I'm sure. This is my decision. I've bowed to others' choices for years. Now it's my turn." A deep sigh came from the other end. "All right, Margaret. Whatever you say. I'll rent the venue to another couple." When I hung up, a strange lightness settled in me. For the first time, I felt the chains that had weighed on me for years breaking. In the face of the family that excluded and belittled me, I was rising with my silence. And that silence was louder than any scream. Every step I took in the house echoed with the past. Laughter embedded in the walls, the smell of cookies baking in the kitchen, fireflies lighting up the porch at night, they were still here, but hidden in the shadows, behind Laura's foreign decor. My eyes caught on the kitchen counter. When Emily was little, she'd steal cookie dough there, looking at me guiltily as she brought her fingers to her mouth. I'd pretend to scold her, then giggle and give her another piece. Now, that counter held Laura's ostentatious jars, and used spice bottles. My warm memories felt smothered by the cold gleam of glass. I stopped onto the porch. James and I had spent countless summer evenings there. He'd have his guitar, I'd sit with a glass of lemonade. The sound of waves accompanied his singing. The dreams we built under the stars still whispered in my ears. But now, there was a new sofa on the porch, a modern lamp in the corner. Everything was foreign, uninvited. What hurt most were the photos. Pictures of James and me, memories from family vacations. All removed, replaced with ornate paintings Laura chose. Those paintings meant nothing to me. Looking at them, I felt the house becoming a stranger. One afternoon, Emily came to me. She stepped into the living room with small steps, looking at me with worry in her eyes. "Grandma, why are you always so quiet?" she asked. My heart stopped for a moment. The innocence in her small face exposed my brokenness. "I'm not quiet, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. The soft strands slipped through my fingers as my heart ached. "I'm just waiting." But I was lying. Waiting was just another name for helplessness. I had stayed silent for years, ignored for years. And now, my silence was coming back to me like a heavy chain. That night, I retreated to my room and pulled out James's letter again. The paper was worn, the ink slightly faded, but the words were still fresh. Between the lines, I spoke with his voice. "You were the heart of this family, Margaret. No matter what they do, your light won't fade." That sentence rekindled a forgotten fire in my heart. My eyes welled up, but this time my tears weren't from sadness, they were from resolve. The next morning, I woke with my decision made. I picked up the phone and called Linda, one of Tampa's best realtors. Her voice was energetic and confident. "I want to sell the house," I said without hesitation. A brief silence followed. Then, surprised, she asked, "You've lived in that house for years, Margaret. It's your life. Are you sure?" I looked out the window. The garden flowers were wilting, the porch lamp dim. The house that had been my home for years now felt like nothing but chains. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "And we need to move fast." Linda came the next day. Taking off her wide-brimmed hat, she surveyed the place with professional eyes, examining every detail. She took photos, toured the rooms. "The market's great right now," she said, smiling. "We can get the price you want. It'll sell quickly." In that moment, I realized selling the house wasn't just a financial decision. It was about taking back the reins of my life. Laura and Michael thought the house would be theirs, as if they had a right to my life's foundation. They were wrong. The deed was still in my name. That small piece of paper was silent proof of the power I'd forgotten for years. Linda handled the sale process swiftly and meticulously. Within a week, the listing was ready, photos taken, market analysis done. A house like this in Tampa's coastal town wouldn't wait long for buyers. 3 days later, 4 offers came in. A tech investor, a major renovation company, a young couple, and a widowed woman, Sarah. Each offer was different, each told its own story. Sarah's voice on the phone was tired but hopeful. "I want a fresh start," she said, as if chasing a long-lost piece. I chose her. Her offer was cash, the process quick, and Linda handled all the procedures seamlessly. When we signed the papers, my hand didn't tremble. A strange calm filled me. After years of staying silent, putting others' happiness before my own, I had finally made a decision entirely for myself. Linda turned to me, smiling. "This will change your life," she said, her voice full of excitement. "It already has," I said quietly, but with a deep sense of triumph inside. The sale was completed in a week. The house was now Sarah's. That small box, holding James's memories, my patience, and years of accumulated moments, now belonged to its new owner. Sarah took possession, organized by Linda. Keys, final checks, and documents were handed over flawlessly. Michael and Laura were sent formal notice. They had 7 days to vacate the house. This could turn their world upside down, but it was no longer my problem. That evening, my phone started ringing. It was Michael. I didn't answer. The silent satisfaction inside me didn't allow for arguments. Laura left a message. "Margaret, how could you do this? This is our home." But the house wasn't hers or Michael's. It was James's and mine. They were merely guests. I had stayed silent, sacrificed, given everything for years. But now, everything had turned upside down. That night, I sat alone in a hotel room. Tampa's lights shimmered over the sea like scattered jewels. Holding a cup of hot tea, I looked out the window and took a deep breath. This was freedom. I had lived by others' rules, sought their approval for years. But now I was writing my own rules. The responsibility for my life was mine, and that feeling was indescribable relief. Michael called again. I silenced the phone. I could imagine their panic, Laura's angry face, Michael's desperate voice. But this time, their emotions weren't my concern. My silence wasn't the echo of suppressed anger or pain anymore. It was a quiet celebration of my freedom and my right to set my own boundaries. I finished that night sipping my tea, with a peace I hadn't felt in years. As I closed my eyes, every word I'd silenced, every feeling I'd suppressed over the years, now spoke through my silence. I was no longer just a listener, I was the author of my own life. A week later, in the early morning, a light rain was drizzling. A knock came at my hotel door, and when I opened it, I saw Michael. He was soaked, his hair plastered by the rain, his eyes red and tired. His face held both fear and desperation. "Mom, please," he said, his voice trembling. "You sold the house. You canceled the wedding. Emily's devastated." I looked at him silently. The feelings I'd suppressed for years surged like a wave. Instead of accusing him, I chose silence. "You excluded me from my granddaughter's wedding," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "You made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Now, that house isn't yours." Michael bowed his head, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if carrying all his anger and guilt at his knees. "We're sorry," he said finally, his voice fragile. "We made a mistake." But his apology came too late. At the point where something in me had broken, time couldn't be undone. "Mistakes have consequences," I said, resolve settling in my eyes. "Now you'll find your own way." My words were the echo of years of suppressed anger and newfound self-respect. Michael stood for a few seconds, then silently stepped back. I closed the door, and as raindrops pattered against the window behind me, a sense of freedom rose within me. The feeling was bittersweet, but all I truly felt was the control I'd regained after years of losing it. The next day, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Laura. "Margaret, we can talk." For Emily. Please. But there was nothing to talk about. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. Their anger, their guilt, was all directed at me, but it no longer mattered. Silence was the very essence of my strength. I had drawn my boundaries after years of staying silent and stepping back. That evening, I sat by the hotel room window, holding a cup of hot tea. Outside, a light rain drifted over the coast like a thin mist. My thoughts were clear. Selling the house wasn't just a transaction, it was reclaiming my life, making my own decisions, living without needing others' approval. I pulled out maps, real estate brochures, and documents from the sale from my bag. I wanted to leave Tampa. My eyes caught on a listing for a small house in a coastal town, close to the sea, quiet, with 4 walls, a porch, and a small garden. My place, my peace. I would no longer live by others' plans or expectations. My silence was no longer a weapon, it was a tool of freedom. That evening, I sat on the porch for a long time. The rain had stopped, and the first stars began to shine in the sky. A new resolve and peace filled me. Ahead of me was a new beginning, a space to build my own life. Silence was now a lifestyle I chose. No one could make me feel like a stranger anymore. And in that moment, I decided to write my own story, to create my own peace. A month later, I moved to a quiet coastal town in Florida, to a small house near the sea. It wasn't flashy, it had 4 walls, a porch, a small flower garden, and the salty scent of the sea. A narrow path of white pebbles led to the porch. Inside, it was simple but warm, lit by sunlight streaming through the windows, with my old but cherished belongings on the wooden floors. The first morning, I took my coffee to the porch. Standing barefoot, my feet touched the pebbles, a cool sensation mingling with the moment. The rhythmic sound of waves brought the peace I'd longed for. The silence was so deep, it was as if I was breathing again after years of holding my breath. I hadn't heard from Michael or Laura. I kept my phone on silent and didn't open their messages. Before, I might have worried, put their feelings first. But not anymore. In this house, I had found my strength. I made my own decisions, set my own boundaries. I no longer moved by others' approval, I was living my own life. I brought a few of James's things with me. An old photo showed his smiling face on the beach, his smile still warmed my heart. A handmade tablecloth, woven during his chemotherapy days, a reminder of the silent moments that bound us. And a small box, holding the deed, letters, and memories accumulated over years. That box was a silent but powerful reminder of my story. One evening, sitting on the porch, I picked up a small digital recorder. "If you've been excluded by someone you love, know you're not alone," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. Silence isn't defeat. Silence is the moment you gather your strength. If you've stayed quiet for others' approval for years, you can now speak through your own silence. Silence isn't revenge, it's the path to rebirth. When I finished recording, I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and uploaded the clip to the Grandma True Stories channel. I didn't expect it, but people listened. Comments started pouring in. I went through the same thing, one wrote, a quiet solidarity in their words. "Thank you, I heard my own voice," another said, their voice trembling but full of gratitude. Each comment was another lonely woman giving voice to her story, breaking her silence. My silence was no longer just mine, it was becoming the strength of others too. That night, I sat on the porch for a long time. The sea lights danced with the moon's glow on the water. The rhythmic sound of waves calmed my inner turmoil, reminding me of a feeling I'd forgotten for years, freedom. I was now writing my own story, gaining strength through my silence. Michael's or Laura's anger, Emily's disappointment, none of it could shape my world anymore. Silence was my choice. And this silence was now a power, a beginning, and the door to a new life. After uploading the recording, comments flooded in like a river. The screen flickered before me like a small light, each comment whispering another woman's story. Grandmothers, lonely women, people who'd stayed silent for years, postponing their lives for others' desires. Some spoke of betrayal, others of exclusion, some of the weight of sharing their stories silently. But they all shared one thing, the desire to reclaim their strength. Silence had become a chorus. It wasn't just my voice anymore, it was the voice of others too. Tampa's evenings were filled with the scent of the sea. Sitting on my new home's porch, the breeze caressed my hair, the rhythmic waves cleared my mind. James's letter from years ago came to mind. You were the heart of this family. Those words reminded me of the meaning of my suppressed emotions and silence over the years. He was right. And I was rebuilding that heart, within myself and in the silent strength echoing in others' stories. Michael sent one message, "Mom, can we talk?" I held the phone, read the message several times, but didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. They hadn't understood my silence. They might have understood their anger, their disappointment, their losses, but not the truth. But others had understood. Comments, messages, video shares. Women were breaking their silence, claiming their rights. Each message sparked another's courage, spreading like links in a chain. One evening, I went to the garden and made a new arrangement. I planted begonias, colorful and vibrant, as James loved. I dug into the soil with my hands, thinking of the past and future among the roots. Every morning, I took my coffee to the porch, feeling my peace as the sun slowly rose. My phone rarely rang, messages came occasionally. But it no longer bothered me. I had my own peace now, a life unshaped by others' approval. Grandma True Storytime became a community over time. Stories spread like waves touching one another. Some women found their voice for the first time, others expressed feelings suppressed for years. Each story broke another woman's silence, empowering her. And I, Margaret Wilson, a mother, a grandmother, a widowed woman, had learned to speak through my silence. Silence was no longer weakness, it was proof of my strength, patience, and resolve, and that of others. That night, sitting on the porch, I watched the starlight reflect on the sea. The sound of waves was like the melody of silence. I was no longer alone. I was here not just for myself but for everyone wanting to break their silence. And I knew silence wasn't just waiting, it was gathering strength and using it rightly when the time came. A year passed. In my coastal home, surrounded by Florida's waves, I had rebuilt my life. Mornings began on the porch with a coffee mug, watching my garden filled with begonias' colors. Each flower, each leaf, erased the painful memories of the past, bringing me peace. The sun's reflection on the sea reminded me of the warm days James loved, but the weight of the past no longer crushed my shoulders. I was living in my own time, with my own decisions. Grandma True Storytime had become a movement. It started with a single voice recording. One woman shared her silence, then another whispered her long-hidden feelings to the camera. Today, women from around the world write to me, share videos, tell their stories. Betrayal, exclusion, abandonment, but most importantly, women rediscovering their strength. They were breaking their silence, taking control of their lives. And I, Margaret Wilson, was guiding them with my silence. Some messages said, "I didn't understand this, but your story gave me strength." In some videos, I saw courage in the eyes of young women finding their voice for the first time. I realized then that silence wasn't just waiting, it was building a community, a form of justice. This justice wasn't achieved by shouting but by thinking, planning, and taking the right step when the time came. On the coastal porch, as starlight danced on the waves, the weight of the past felt gone. Michael and Laura could still call or message, their anger, regret, or guilt was no longer my concern. Silence had become a symbol of strength. Over the year, I learned silence wasn't just waiting. It was remembering, protecting, and, when needed, the voice of justice. I opened my screen and watched the latest video on the channel. A young mother spoke of her ignored efforts, her eyes teary but her voice strong. In that moment, I felt indescribable pride. As a woman who'd become a symbol of justice through silence, I was inspiring other women to take bold steps in their lives. If you've been hurt by someone you love, made to feel like a stranger in the life you built, know you're not alone. And you're not finished. Grandma True Stories is here, a community turning silence into speech. Here, revenge doesn't shout, it remembers. Silence is justice itself. And justice speaks with a cup of tea, the scent of the sea, in its own time. And I, Margaret Wilson, a mother, a grandmother, a widowed woman, knew the power of silence. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape my future with the justice born of silence. And I did.